Okay, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Our very first guest is with us in the house. The golf stat pro, Mr. Lou Stagner, is with us in New Jersey right now.
Yeah, New Jersey. Good afternoon, gentlemen. It's good to be here, so thanks for having me on.
Welcome. Pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, Lou. Really, really appreciate it. We were keen, to set up our first guest to the podcast and make it someone, that really we thought, again, always thinking of the audience, someone that could provide massive amounts of value. I don't know if I've thought of anyone providing more value on a daily basis in golf over the last, especially in the social media world, over the last several years than yourself. I think the analytics, the insights that you provide golfers, I'm following you on every platform, but especially on Twitter, there's so much that I think golfers can learn from following your account on there. So kudos to you for that. And, that's exactly why we wanted you on here today. Yeah,
I appreciate the kind words. And being the first guest, I'm going to have to win multiple fitted clubs by you, I think, is what the prize needs to be.
That's easy. That's easy for us to do.
That
is
an
easy one. Yeah.
Sweet.
We can definitely do
Done.
That. So, Lou, let's dive into a little bit of your role specifically with Arccos as the data insights lead. Maybe kind of, tell us how, the path that you've been on has led you to that and what you're currently doing with Arccos.
Yeah, I have an interesting past. So about 5 years ago, I started a blog on golf analytics. I live here in the Northeast where it's cold, as you know, where you are in Toronto. And I needed to kill some time in the winter. And I told my wife I was going to spin up a blog on golf analytics. I thought I had some things that people might find interesting. And she thought I was crazy. And I did. And so started it up and never really expected much. I thought maybe my friends would read it. And it got some traction pretty quickly. And I started to put some info out on social media. That got some traction really quickly. I've worked with a few different people along the way, a few different players along the way. And about a year and a half ago, ended up with Arccos and helping them out in a role that allows me to give them some, guidance and insight on some of the back end and some of the things they're doing, and then be, a public face that takes some of that data, which is creeping up on 700 million shots, and turning some of that data into information that the general golf population can use and benefit from. So it's been a cool and fun ride, and I have a blast every day. Get to play with all of that amateur data. I have access to ShotLink data as well, so I get to look at tour data. And I could literally spend 24/7 in each of those spots and just looking at all of the information in front of me.
Amazing. Tell us about you as a golfer. What's the handicap? What's the level of the game?
I finished last year as a 2.4.
Awesome. That's
quite good.
And before family, before kid, I played down at scratch for a number of years. Was good enough to get into a few state AMs, but I was never good enough to be a threat in anything. But was okay enough to put up a good number every now and again. My handicap ballooned up after I was married and stopped playing a whole lot when my daughter was born. And I was getting out just a handful of times a year and probably went up to 9 or a 10 in that range. And then I've been back at it here for a few years now and putting some reps in, and finished last year down in the 2s, which was great. I'm still a horrible ball striker. I wish I could swing the club better, but we're making some progress.
But you've got analytics on your side and you're squeezing everything out the game with the data.
I am squeezing everything out of this train wreck of a swing that I
can. Absolutely love it. I love it. Well, we've got some questions for you. We've got some, things that we want to kind of pick your brain on specifically. And, why don't we dive right into that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. So first question we had was from a statistical perspective. What area of the game should people spend most time improving? Where could their time be best spent?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm going to answer it two ways. The first way, generically, I assume that your listenership is going to be very similar to what I come across on Twitter or on my podcast or my newsletter. A lot of people in that 8 to 15 range. Mm-hmm. And as a generic statement, they should be working on their ball striking, and they need to get better at ball striking. So off the tee, approach play, keeping the ball in play, minimizing penalty strokes, making solid contact, picking good targets. that's generically, and that would, knowing nothing else, that would apply. But this is why I'm going to give an example, and this is why it's extremely important to know what you need to work on. So let's say that we have 3 10 handicap players on the tee box. We all show up on the first tee. I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. All right, cool. We're not playing with any strokes today. And the first player putts like the average 10 handicap. The second player is in the bottom 5% of putters for 10 handicap players. They would putt like the typical 20 handicap players. The best putter in the group, remember, still a 10 handicap, they putt like the typical scratch player. So you have 3 players that are all 10 handicaps overall. One of them putts like the typical 20, one of them putts like the typical scratch. There's just over 5 shots of difference in putting skill between those 2 players, even though they're both 10 indexes, 10 handicaps. So those players would have very different approaches as to what they should be working on. The player that putts like a 20 needs to spend some time working on that putting and getting better with putting. And the player that is putting like the scratch player probably just needs to maintain, doesn't need to put a whole lot of effort in. So this is why it's so important to know what your blueprint is, what your fingerprint is, what your game is like, so you can focus on your weaknesses. And by doing that, it helps you to improve quicker and start to get more out of your game, which are some of the things I've done for my own game. Focus on my weaknesses to try to improve. And that's a great way to capture some of that low-hanging fruit for golfers.
Amazing.
It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm a victim of that. I don't practice the stuff I need to practice. I just hit a couple wedges and go play.
And all you want to do is hit your driver further, but that probably wouldn't
hit maybe 10 a year.
Yeah, Lou, we speak about it a lot in the club fitting, our studio specifically. What is it we're trying to do with our clients? And it's trying to get them to perform better, score better, ultimately enjoy the game more. And, if we can get the more tools we can give them, and obviously we're focused on their clubs, but if we can give them, again, that's I guess the function of the podcast is how do we provide the people who pay attention to our content, how do we give them more tools to be a better golfer?
Yeah, and tracking your stats is and it's going to sound like a sales pitch, but it's not. I'd love for someone to use Arccos, but at the end of the day, I enjoy trying to help golfers get better. And if you're going to track your stats on the back of a napkin, because that's what you're most comfortable with, I would support that, because that's the kind of info that you really need to take the bias that we all have in our own game. We do a pretty poor job at aggregating all of our data, our stats, our information about us. And we start to get these notions about what we're good at and what we're bad at. And sometimes we're okay at that, and sometimes we're really poor at that. And knowing where you actually stand in every facet of the game, by removing your own opinions and inputs and your feelings based on how you played that day. And you may have missed a 6-foot putt in a critical situation, and now all of a sudden you're the worst putter in the world, when the reality is you're a really good putter. You're just going to miss a couple of 6-footers. And so removing all of that and knowing what your numbers are gives you very important information to focus your efforts to tackle the things you need to tackle.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Love that.
Last episode, Lou, we talked a lot. It may even spilled over into 2 episodes about the ball rollback. Mike, am I correct that none of us are a fan?
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Okay, so
Definitely
collectively not a fan over at TXG. Not sure what your thoughts are, Lou, but we were kind of thinking, if that's not the route that makes sense, to go to actually control, scoring and distance in the game, is there something else you see as a better alternative, like maybe a solution that would be a little bit more popular amongst the kind of the general public of golf?
Yeah, I'm also in the same camp that all of you are. I'm not a proponent of rolling anything back. The only, I guess, positive I would say that I've heard from all of this is that they did not pitched this for amateur players.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, as they were leading up to this, Mike Wan's predecessor, Mike Davis, was talking about distance being a threat to every level of golf, every golf course. Amateurs needed everything rolled back, and I think that would have been a tremendous mistake. Amateurs need more distance, not less. And so I'm glad that they didn't do that, but I think rolling back the pro game to me makes no sense. And, the alternative is, in my opinion, is do nothing. I think everything is great as it is. And the gains that we've seen since the regulations went in place in, I think it was 2004, according to John Spitzer, who is the gentleman at the USGA that's in charge of equipment standards and testing, according to him, almost all gains since 2004 because of the player himself. These are his exact words. He said those to my face on my podcast. So this is not something I plucked from somewhere. It was part of a conversation that I was involved in. And so equipment is not why we've seen an uptick since 2004. We've seen upticks because of people like you, better fitting, better understanding of launch conditions and optimizing all of that, a better understanding of distance and how important it is, better understanding of fitness, nutrition. PGA Tour players are getting younger. There's not as many older players. So that has happened. Agronomy has changed a bit. There's so many factors that have all come together with, I think, our understanding of distance being important, helping to lead the charge on all of this. And distance has always been an advantage and always will be an advantage. But until the advent of strokes gained, which it's kind of remarkable to think about it, but it didn't start, wasn't started on the PGA Tour until 2011. I think Brody's paper was, 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there. They didn't start using it until 2011, and they first initially only used it for putting. And so it took a few years, and Brody's book came out, 2014 maybe, Every Shot Counts, around there. And that started to, pick up momentum. It started to get more exposure. Tour players started to use and leverage this more. And that, to me, helped us to really quantify how important distance is, which is why you see so many players driving towards that, because it's a huge advantage. So, to kind of go back and just reiterate, I don't think anything needs to change. I think the game's in a great spot, and I don't think there's any harm in leaving it as is.
Yeah, I actually really like that take quite a bit. I think we all feel pressured we did it to you, to give an answer as an alternative. Right. But I actually kind of prefer the answer of just leave it alone. Yeah, I like watching golf the way it is as well.
Totally.
Love that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best opinion I've heard on
the
subject.
And I think, so many people will say, well, we're running out of room. Well, that's not true. And, the Distance Insight report is made up of 56 or 57 reports, sub-reports that they summarized into 100-ish page document and a 15-ish page sort of executive summary. I read all 56 reports in there, and they've studied a number of things around distance, related to distance, with one of those things being the playing distance of golf courses. And I can see this with my access to ShotLink data. So they are typically, in nearly every round that's played on tour, is played at shorter than the yardage on the golf course. And almost half are played at about 100 yards shorter than what's on the scorecard. So there is still a ton of room on existing golf courses to stretch them even farther without having to add any land or add any tee boxes. The notion of adding land is also completely false. They studied that. They're not adding land. There's one paper in there that very specifically, in the study that they did, says that there's so many instances of golf courses adding a significant amount of distance, either through new tees or relocating greens, and did that within the existing footprint of the property. And the only time, or I don't want to say the only time, but for courses that increased their footprint, the likelihood that they increased their footprint through the addition or expansion of a practice facility, that was by far the driving factor of the expansion of the footprint. And when they removed those courses that added a driving range or expanded a driving range, the average footprint actually decreased in size for the courses that they studied. So the people out there that are talking about land expansion and all that, to me, that's disingenuous. It's not true. The USGA studied that. I know they always use 13 at Augusta as an example, and the millions of dollars that they paid for that. But, this is and I love Augusta. It's awesome. I love the tournament. It's my favorite of the year. But this is a golf course that literally bought a neighborhood and knocked down houses so they could have a parking lot. They just bulldozed their par 3 and rebuilt it. So if they wanted to spend money to extend 13, they're going to do what they want to do. They have unlimited funds. So it drives me nuts when they use that as the example. So as you can tell, I could go on and on this topic for about an hour. So I'm gonna pause now and we can move on to something else.
Your opinion is a popular one amongst us there. So great to hear your perspective on it. Looking into your crystal ball, what impact would you say, or what impact could Arccos have on the game in 10 years, Lou? With data, if people start using data and data becomes more powerful, and we've got some insights to some of the things that are coming down the pipeline from Arccos, which are really exciting for us. What impact could that have in the game?
It's transformational. So you can, as an amateur player, you can get access to the same kind of data that players on the PGA Tour are using and leveraging for their own game. So to be able to have access to that as just, somebody playing at the course near your house on Saturday mornings, I think is fantastic. Being able to get strokes gained every part of your game. There's things that they're working on that I don't know that I got to be careful about what I say out loud. But there are phenomenal enhancements that are coming to what they do, how they do it, the information that's going to be available, which is just going to continue to make the product better and better and better. And that's one of the things that I really love about what they're doing. They don't sit idle. They are constantly iterating and trying to make everything better with what they do and what they provide. And to me, that's just a very exciting spot. As a math nerd, as a numbers nerd, as a golf geek, it's extremely exciting to, have a very, very tiny, small role and be a part of that. So as they continue to advance the product, it's just going to give golfers more tools to help them improve, which is, what you guys are all about. It's what I try to do with the performance coaching that I do. And it's what Arccos is trying to do with the product that they provide to their customers. So it's cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love the integration that's happening with Arccos, with launch monitor companies, with, things like Stack System, all these tools that are now being linked together that are going to help golfers, get faster, get better, get smarter, more dialed in, with their games and equipment. To be honest, I kind of feel like Arccos is sitting in the middle of all that right now, and just joining all these tentacles of performance. And it's almost like if you want access to join all those dots, you have to have Arccos right now.
Yeah, it's a key piece of the puzzle, in my opinion.
I think the access is crazy. Like a golfer like myself who wants to get better, I'm a 3 handicap or whatever, I don't utilize Arccos enough. Mm-hmm. And then you utilize Arccos a ton. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there going through and you're like, okay, I need to go work on X. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I played unreal the last 3 weeks in a row. The fact that we all have access to it and the general public have access to, PGA Tour quality data, I mean, it's insane. And
it is, yeah.
I'm ashamed that I don't use it, but it's gonna change after this podcast.
It will.
But I mean, that kind of leads into the next question. Obviously, physical capabilities aside, the professional golfer now being an athlete, what do they do that high handicappers could learn from and add to their own game?
That's a good question. I mean, they do everything better, and it's a silly answer, but they are better at everything. They're longer, they're straighter, they hit the ball crisper, and they make better decisions. Everything about their game is better than a mid and high handicapper. There are some things when you look in the data really start to stand out around big mistakes, around penalty shot situations, around club selection on holes that are challenging, around how they play recovery shots. They're making better decisions there. I can't tell you how many times I'm out with, and I don't want to pick on any of my buddies here, but I'm going to. I'm out with my buddies that are 12, 15, 16 handicaps, and they get off in the woods and, they're trying to, hit a window that's, no bigger than a car window at 50 yards away. And if they don't hit this window, there's triple, quadruple in play or worse, and they're trying to hit that window. And it's entertaining to watch. It's a lot of fun, and it's not as much fun when they're on my team, and I'm going to lose money on that. But they're making pretty poor decisions there. So the easiest answer there is they do absolutely everything better than the mid and high handicap player. I'm sure you probably have some follow up, so I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, no. I mean,
it's not surprising.
No.
Yeah.
I think maybe the follow-up I would have would be, given that they do everything better, where do you start? I mean, I think if I was a 30 handicap right now, I would hear you and I'd say, yeah, he's absolutely right about that. I make worse decisions. I hit the ball worse. I putt worse. I chip worse. I eat worse. I don't exercise, onwards and onwards. But where would you start if you had that, 25 handicap that's committed to improving? They want to, they're not going to be a tour player by any means, but they can move their handicap in the right direction. Where would you kind of start? And I know it depends on the player, but what's kind of statistically, what is the thing that helps the most?
Yeah, they need to just make solid contact and keep the ball in play.
Keep it in play.
They absolutely need to keep the ball in play. For amateurs, and I've written about this, and I've talked about this a lot, fairways are completely overrated for amateurs. They're generally a useless statistic. The delta between an amateur player from the fairway versus from the rough is not very big. It's typically only about 1/10 of a shot. So if you put a 10 handicap in the fairway at 140, 160, 120 yards, the difference between fairway and rough at the same distance is only about 1/10 of a shot, which isn't that much. On the PGA Tour, it's about 1/3 of a shot, give or take. And this is all going to be influenced and changed by rough height. So the difference is going to be smaller in shorter rough. It's going to be greater in taller rough. But on the average, the delta is a lot closer. And that's not because amateurs are significantly better from the rough than tour players are. It's because amateurs aren't as good from the fairway as tour players are from the fairway. You give a tour player a lie from the fairway where they can they understand how it's going to spin. They understand what trajectory it's going to come out. They can control what the golf ball is going to do. They're really good. Amateurs, they don't benefit from that as much. And sometimes amateurs, depending on the skill level, they are almost better off in the rough, depending. And I'm sure you see this all the time. It's perched up a little bit. It makes low point control a little bit easier. You get them on really tight lies. It can be, that's a recipe for disaster. And trust me, I know. And don't ask me how I know. But those are some of the things that are influencing why fairways are not important. So the most important thing for amateurs is strictly keep the ball in play. I encourage them to not even look at fairway percent and just look at how often they have a realistic opportunity to hit a green in regulation after their tee shot. So we just want something that's relatively solid and in play, not OB, not in the water. I do want to mention traps. We do want to avoid traps as amateur players, especially mid and high handicap players. They are typically very bad out of traps, both fairway traps and greenside traps. And they're so bad out of traps where a mid-high handicap-ish type player, even down to 9s, 10s, are typically going to be better off being short-sighted in the rough around the green versus being long-sighted in a bunker. Just because they are not very good out of bunkers. So that's a long way of saying make reasonable contact and keep the ball in play, avoid penalties. Some of that is going to be done by swing and getting good at making better contact, and some of it's going to be controlled too by club choices. And one of the things that's interesting that I'm going to turn the tables. I have questions for you. So I've known a number of players now that have done this, and I'm the first person to tell you how important distance is. But a number of mid-high handicap players have gone through and put really, really short shafts in their driver. I'm talking 41-inch shafts in their driver. These are 12, 15 handicaps. And some of them have gotten on quads or TrackMans, and they've done before and after from their 45.5-inch shaft down to their 41-inch shaft. And they've gotten much, much better at putting the ball closer to the center of the face and much better at controlling the face with that shorter shaft. Is that something that you've ever looked at in detail for mid to high handicappers, a super short shaft on a driver?
I mean, I had a guy a couple weeks ago in the Bay on a Friday, and he was like, I play hockey. I always used to use a shorter shaft, and it was, I was a better hockey player when I did that. And then because we don't have really short shafts, I kind of taped it. I was like, okay, grip underneath that tape. And as soon as we did that, his strike, his speed went up, everything was better. He looked at me, he's like, just chop it. And so he bought, I think we did 42 inches or something like that for his driver. Distance for him.
Graphite Design DI, $500 shaft. He's like,
just
3
chop
inches.
it.
Cut all the good stuff out of it.
In a TSR 4 driver. So his speed actually went up. His distance technically went a little bit further at that shorter shaft. So it definitely, it's got something to it.
Is it? I mean, that sounds like a rare instance. Fair enough. Like, it doesn't sound like a thing that would blanket work in fitting.
No, I mean, I think, it's a tool that, if it goes back to contact, like if you cannot make solid contact, contact is king by far. If you can, I always say as a fitter, give me solid contact, I can make your ball, properly and do whatever you want it to do. Without that, we're kind of, we're struggling to make anything predictable. So I mean, working for an OEM before, being in this line, Lou, I used to take 3-wood shafts all the time and plug them into drivers. And, people who were struggling specifically, we done a video earlier this week where we talked about different styles of swingers. Yeah. Plane changers, people who typically have the club moving, inside, then over the top and try and manipulate the plane significantly. They really benefit from heavy and short.
Right.
I mean, 41 is short.
Super short. Is that a hybrid or a 5-wood? No.
Yeah, it's a 4. It's a 2 hybrid.
2 hybrid,
2 hybrid length. Yeah.
That's super short. But I mean, you guys, with a huge head, you guys would obviously, luckily, know how to balance the club. Unfortunately, a lot of people would do that. And I did it.
Yeah.
Remember the first time I ever came to TXG, I had like a swing weight C8 driver because I just went to a store and said, cut this because I'm a smart guy. And then
Alda-Lafinum.
I will tell you what I need. Yeah, Alda-Lafinum. And then Ian swing weights, he's kind of like, this is a disaster. Yeah. So if I had have done it with you would have obviously put, heavier weight in the head or hot melted or something to make it functional. So people just need to, as long as they do that and get fit and not just waste their time thinking it's going to work for everybody. It could work. Yeah.
Well, there's always the other things that go along with it. By making a club that short, you're significantly changing the lie angle. You're significantly changing, the way the shaft deflects. Some people might go on, I'm missing it a little bit left, so I'm going to go short on the driver, and I'm going to go with a mid-sized grip or a bigger grip, and then the grip offsets the swing weight significantly. Like, you've got all these layers of problems compounding on top of one another, or solutions. Yeah. These might be solutions in it, and it's at what point do you finally get the answer? The whole concoction works. Right. But which is the answer? Yeah. So I just, Lou, I've got a thing, about club fitting right now. I think we live in far too much of a safe space that the progressions of length and swing weight and grip size and these things are, there's almost too much conformity to it. I don't think we truly are understanding what works best for the individual if you're not testing. How do you know that D2 swing weight's the best if you haven't tested D8 versus C5? And are we really testing that stuff, enough? We know what kind of safely works. Yeah. But I don't think we truly understand, what could be the best for every single player.
Yeah, we talked about that last week, right? You got to go a little crazy to see what might work for somebody.
And I find that swing weight conversation online becomes an argument, and people think light swing weight, heavy swing weight. No one really knows. You have to test it.
Yeah.
You have to test it for yourself.
We know there's some physics around
yeah.
head weights and heavier head weights are higher MOI. We know that they produce more output and ball speed, etc., etc. So, we do know there's those things, but what else does it do? Does it create more deflection, more variability in the shaft?
Yeah.
Does that variability in the shaft lead to more variability in the strike? We're saying contact is king. So it's definitely a complicated one.
Yeah.
Well, just give me a 60-inch shaft. I just want to hit bombs.
Yeah.
So
like Mikey.
High launch, low spin, baby. That's what you need.
I'm talking about.
47.5 autoflex, you'll be fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. We need to get Lou up here. I think we would have a lot of fun having Lou in the fitting bay.
I think we would absolutely.
We can make that happen. So I get back to the Buffalo area every year to visit family and friends.
That's not far.
So, you're a 2-ish hour drive away. So we can make it happen this summer.
Do it.
Okay, should.
But as you were kind of rhyming off your handicap, and I know what Sal's handicap is, I think we need a Arccos Scramble team versus TXG Scramble team.
That would be,
that'd be great.
You guys have got some serious players. That one needs to live on the YouTube channel.
That would be something else.
And that would be an absolute blast.
Let's make it happen.
They manage their game a little bit better.
At Oakmont, though.
But we'd have better club selection.
We would have a nice.
Yeah,
we have the nicest bags, but we might not. Yeah, we might not manage the game quite as smartly.
That would be awesome. Lou, one of the things that you talk about a lot on Twitter is managing or having players manage their expectations a little bit more around, how many greens they should hit from 100 yards, 120 yards versus the best players. Can you give us a little context on that and, a little dose of reality for some golfers who get, pretty mad at themselves?
Yeah, I think managing your expectations is extremely important. So having expectations that are realistic for your skill level can play a very big part in how you actually perform. And so there are, countless amateurs that have reached out to me, friends that I have, people that I know that had this idea in their head that from 100 yards in the fairway, very popular distance. And when we watch golf on TV, we're seeing typically the best players in the world on a heater. Most people are watching golf on the weekends, and on the weekends, they're primarily showing players at the top of the leaderboard.
True.
And players at the top of the leaderboard are playing really well that week. So they're hitting a lot of good shots. And that's kind of our, one of our benchmarks that we're using. And I think that impacts what amateur players think. I don't understand why. I think as golfers, we're all out of our minds for that because, I don't see LeBron dunk a basketball, or Steph shoot threes, or Josh Allen throw a football, or on and on and on, and say, you know what, I can do that. But for some reason, us golfers, we see tour players and I can show you my DMs that are just loaded up with these comments. We think that because we're playing quote unquote easier golf courses, that we should be hitting wedges as close as tour players, which is completely ludicrous. And so having good expectations, I think helps in a couple different ways. And when you dovetail that into how you're actually performing and what your stats look like, I think this is how those work together. You might be a really decent wedge player as let's say a 12 handicap. And for a 12 handicap, you might be performing with your wedges better than what the typical 12 handicap would perform at. But because your expectations are completely out of whack, you think that you're a poor wedge player. And now that you start thinking you're a poor wedge player, you actually might start impacting your ability to hit good wedge shots. You might get frustrated. And as you know, playing golf when you're frustrated, mad, angry, upset, use the word you want to use, it's tough to play golf that way. And if you start to let some of these shots that you think should be significantly better, if you start letting that impact your emotional state, that's not a good way to play golf. That doesn't result in you optimizing your chances to score as well as you possibly could. So having expectations that are reasonable for your skill level, I think, is extremely important. Now, I want to qualify that doesn't mean I want you to care less. It doesn't mean I want you to go out and and not try to hit the ball exactly to where your target is, because I do. Every single shot, I want you to give 100%, pick a really quality target and give everything you have to hit the ball to that target, but then realize that that's rarely going to happen. And it rarely happens for tour pros, much less somebody like me with a desk job that plays on the weekend. So having things that are reasonable for your skill level, I think are really, really important. And I always get a kick out of, putting quizzes and information out around, like this topic, for example, 100-yard wedge shots. On PGA Tour, the average proximity is like 18 and a half feet. I don't have it in front of me. It's right around there. I want to say median is around 15 and a half, 16 feet. They miss the green 18, 19% of the time from 100 yards in the fairway. And when you ask the general population, they think that they never miss. And they think that they should rarely miss as well from 100 yards in the fairway. It's such an easy shot. I should never miss. But that's just not how it's going to work. But what I'll say is you need to track your stats, because just because you manage your expectations well, and you have expectations that are reasonable for your skill level, doesn't mean that your wedge play might not need work. And using something like Arccos to look at your strokes gained on a per shot basis by distance is going to give you really good information to know, hey, I'm not a great wedge player. And so this is not only important for giving you guidance on where to spend your practice time, but when you walk in to see your instructor, which I advocate very highly, having a good instructor, you can give your instructor really good information. When you walk in to see your fitter, you can give your fitter really good information, as opposed to when everybody shows up for a lesson right now, ask any instructor, 99% of the instructors will say, the student says, I want to be more consistent. That's what they all say. Yeah. They probably say that to you too, and fitting. 100%. I want to be more consistent. So being able to show up with really good data that quantifies where your misses are, how many misses you have, what they look like, is awesome info for coaches and fitters. And that, combined with you focusing your efforts in the right way and having good expectations, is how you start to drive your handicap down. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here and a manifesto, but it's something that golfers could really benefit from, taking this approach.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely. Lou, you do a weekly newsletter. This week's newsletter, you talk about idle golf clubs. Some fascinating stats in there about golf clubs that people have in the bag that they rarely ever use. 13% of golfers carry a club that is used less than once every 10 rounds. 10% use a club or have clubs that are used less than once every 20 rounds.
That is insane.
Yeah. I know a few guys that I play with on the weekend that are right in those stats, 100%.
I mean, I definitely have a couple clubs that don't get used a lot, but it would be every couple rounds. It'd still pull it out of the bag. That's amazing.
In the newsletter, the clubs that are most idle: 4-iron, 3-wood, 3-hybrid, 4-hybrid.
Makes perfect
I know a
sense.
lot of guys, myself included. I've got a good 3-wood now, but I know a bunch of guys I play with. They're afraid to touch the 3-wood. I was like, well, what do I hit here? I was, I can't hit 3-wood. I was like, oh my God, you need to learn how to hit 3-wood.
Or get a new one.
Or a new one. Right? Exactly. That's what I say to them. Oh, I can sell you one.
I could fit you for it.
Yeah, no, those were some pretty fascinating insights. Tell us a little bit about that, Lou.
Yeah, I stumbled into that. So I was looking at club gapping, and I wanted to see how well people were doing with club gapping. And as I was going through this, I noticed somebody that didn't use a club. Like, they had a club in their bag and they only had 14 clubs and they just didn't use this club. And I looked and saw a few more and then went, okay, there might be, what's going on here? Like, how common is this? And when I went through and did the analysis and came back with the data, I mean, it was surprising at first. And then as I thought about it, I went, no, like, that makes sense, because in some ways I'm pretty guilty. I was that guy with the 3-wood that I was so afraid to hit it. Like, if it was on the fairway, I was probably not going to hit it. My angle of attack with my fairway woods prior to fixing this, it could be 1 up, 2 up. That's not a good way to try to hit a 3-wood off the fairway. And so I fixed my problem, but there's a lot of players that struggle with longer clubs, which is, I think, why you see them at the top, and they just leave them in their bag and they don't use them. And I'm a huge proponent of having more than 14 clubs. And I talk about this in the newsletter. Now, I know you can only have 14 when you're playing, but I'm a proponent of having clubs to suit different courses and different conditions and making intelligent decisions, preparing for the round you're going to play at the course you're going to play at, taking into account the weather, and being able to swap out different clubs to fit what you might see at that golf course. And I'm also a huge proponent of trying to, when the situation warrants, and if you can pull this off, trying to tighten up your yardage gaps in areas of the bag where you're going to have a lot of approach shots. Because I've done, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too, I've done some studies around this, having players hit stock shots versus non-stock shots. And stock shots have the tightest dispersion. So when we start to try to add a little yardage or take a little yardage off, it's typically, for most players, their dispersion is going to get a little bit bigger. And so you're better off having as many stock shots as you can, in my opinion, from the data that I've seen. And so I want to find opportunities where I can maybe tighten up my gaps in parts of the bag where I'm going to have a higher percentage of my approach shots. And I don't want to turn this into gapping, but there's a lot of players that have some pretty big gaps between some of their clubs, and it gets really interesting with slower swing speed players, especially as they get down to the longer end of the bag. Like their 6-iron versus 5-iron there's really not much of a difference. And so I think there's opportunities to think through what your bag makeup is. Have different clubs for potentially different distances, different wedges with different bounces for different conditions, and leveraging all 14 slots in your bag instead of having some that are basically not doing anything for you. You're better off taking, the 3-wood that you never use, you're better off taking it out of the bag and, putting a second putter in there if you're going to use it for left to right putts versus right to left putts. So make sure you're not, if you're in that camp, either, work with your instructor to get better or figure out a different club that's going to help you shoot lower scores and that you're going to actually use.
I mean, why let it collect dust in there, right?
Definitely.
Two drivers, a short one and a bomber.
We've seen it. We've seen it from some of the creative guys out there. It's their special teams clubs, isn't it? They bring them out when they need them in special situations, and I think that little idea of having a rotation makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Lou, as somebody who tracks stats and kind of obviously looking at data all the time, I've got to ask you, who's your pick next week in Augusta?
Oh, that's really hard. Yeah, that's really hard. There's probably only a handful of guys that could win. I would really, and I've talked about this a few times before, my sentimental pick is I'd like to see Rory get the career Grand Slam. So I will be rooting for Rory just because I'd like to see him pull that off.
Yeah.
I mean, Scheffler's playing so well right now. These are the obvious picks: Scheffler, Rahm, Rory. They're all playing incredibly well. But my dark horse is the man who snapped his ankle there a few years ago, Tony Finau.
That's a good pick.
He's not much of a dark horse, but he's going to break out. He's definitely going to win more than one major, in my opinion. And then the other one, I'm going to be able to give you 12 names and then go say, hey, I picked the winner. The other one I would watch too is Zalatoris, potentially.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Really good ball striker. So
right.
Going to be whoever wins. It is my favorite week of the year. So
me too.
It doesn't matter. It's just great.
The best.
Do you give orders to the family the same as myself, where you just say, okay, these are 4 days. You do not have access to me when this golf is on,
or the TV.
Yeah.
Unless it's a true blue light emergency.
Yeah, pretty much. And last year I got to go for my first time. I was there for all 7 days, and I told my wife about how much I was going to spend on merchandise, and she thought I was kidding. But I came home with like a U-Haul truck full of a lot of stuff I didn't need, and I could have spent more. But I had to throttle back. It's just an awesome event. It's a lot of fun. I wish I was there again this year, but I will enjoy watching it from the comfort of my living room.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely to get that perspective of the undulation changes and just to be on the property and see,
So good.
to the degree of the manicure and of the fairways and, just how impressive the whole thing is. Matty boy, you got to get down there.
I'm always the guy in the room who's not been to the Masters. It's happening again because Lou got his first one last year.
We got to do it.
I got to go.
You got to go.
So good.
Yeah, it is really an incredible place. The first time I came down 11 and it opens up and you see everything cool there. It was just, it was such a fun experience. Yeah. And I was there with a player, an amateur player, Austin Greaser, who I've worked with for a few years. So I got a little bit of behind the scenes, which was really cool. Just an amazing facility, and I wish I was there right now. I wish I was heading down tomorrow. Yeah,
very, very cool. Well, Lou, listen, thank you for the time. This has been amazing. There's so many more questions, so we'd love to get you back on or get you on the Monday Q&A live. I know we've chatted about having that and giving our, the audience access to asking you questions from their minds. We're giving you stuff that probably you selfishly want to know, but it would be great to have you in the Q&A on a Monday with us. Join us at some point and, let the audience kind of ask away.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, that'd be great. Would love to do that. And I will be warming up the Arccos scramble team so we can be prepared to throttle you guys.
Yes.
All right.
That would be a blast. That would be a blast. Well, and your fitting actually comes after the match.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Well, if you want
a bum fitting before.
Yeah.
You know what, Lou, I'll fit you.
I'll bend your lie angles.
Like you do your lies, I'll do your fit.
Exactly.
Perfect.
That'll be a blast. Guys, please, follow Lou on social media, Golfstat Pro. Twitter's your main focus and handle for social media, Lou.
Yeah, at Lou Stagner. And then if you want to sign up for the newsletter, it's just go to loustagnergolf.com. It's just a landing page to sign up for the newsletter, and it's real easy. And I send out about once a week, and I have some really cool stuff planned, a couple more around fitting that I think you'll probably be interested as we go. Awesome. One with gapping that I'm going to do in the future, which is really cool. So I appreciate the shout outs and look forward to seeing you guys all pretty soon here.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll leave links to all the places that you guys can find, Lou's information, the podcast with Mark Crossfield and Greg Chalmers, Hack It Out podcast. Got to follow along with the guys and just so much good information out there. Golfers are very lucky, I find, right now. There's just some great platforms to share information, and you're certainly one of the guys out there being generous just by literally giving away so much free insight. It's quite incredible. So on behalf of us and the golf community in the TXG world, thank you for doing that, Lou. It's definitely much appreciated.
I appreciate the kind words, and thank you again for having me on. I had a blast. I could go for a few more hours.
We definitely could. That just means we need to do it again.
Definitely.
Awesome. All right, Lou, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks again, guys.
Thanks,
Take
Lou.
care.
Thanks.
All right, boys. So that was a blast.
It was good.
Really good to hear Lou's thoughts and insights into where really anyone can get some learnings from where to lean into some of their weaknesses, improve some parts of their game.
Yeah, I think him saying keep the ball in play is one that people should just, if you're going to remember one thing from this podcast, remember that. It stuck with me a bit.
Totally.
I'm not a 20 handicap, although I sometimes play like one, but in my mind, I'm thinking, keeping the ball in play is probably where I waste 100%. Most of my strokes.
Yeah. I'm making notes over here. Fairways are overrated. Okay, head back to studio.
That was another great take. Fairways overrated. I thought his take on the ball rollback was extremely good. Just leave the whole game alone. I like that too. Yeah, it's good.
You think the fairways overrated is nice for me to hear, because then if I do actually get a bit of distance, who cares? I'll miss a fairway, no problem. I would miss every fairway for 25 extra yards.
We don't play courses that have rough that's long enough that it matters. My home course, if I hit it in the rough, I don't care. It's fine. Just play a little bit of a flyer and you're good to go.
There's going to be places where even if you do hit it far enough, hitting it in the rough is not the huge penalty. I mean, look at Bryson at Wingfoot.
I know.
He was hitting it, obviously far and straight enough at that point, but the clubs he was hitting into those greens, he could still, get it on the surface with the wedge he had in,
Yes.
or sometimes his miss was big enough or bigger. The point, he's hitting it into walkways where the gallery was.
He was everywhere, yeah.
Things like that. So yeah, I thought that was a really really good one. And we've been championing the cause for distance, and you could hear it, for Lou, like, hit it longer, hit it longer. You guys have got to hit it longer.
Yeah.
That kind of attitude, and we see it in the Bay all the time. Not really here for yardage. I'm here to hit it straighter.
No, you're not.
I know. Pipe down.
You don't know what you want to
I
know.
know.
Well, that's the thing with Lou. It's like we're asking him his opinions. They're not really opinions. They're statistics.
Yeah.
He's sharing statistics with you in a spoken form.
Definitely.
So yeah, I mean, if he says hit it further.
Yeah. His Augusta pick, the obvious ones, he named the big three, and they always play well, or certainly in the last few years have played well at Augusta. I thought Finau was an interesting
That was his
one.
darkish horse.
Yeah.
I mean, Finau is too good of a player to be a true dark horse, I think.
Sure.
But I would agree with him. He's maybe not in the top 10 picks, but he comes alive for the Masters
Totally.
pretty
Plays
much
well
every
in
year.
there.
Good
Yeah.
putter.
As
I
long
mean,
as
they're
he
all
doesn't break
good
his
putters,
ankle.
but he gets pretty good with the putter. What he went back to back last year.
Yep.
He did.
Right?
He did.
That's
Yeah.
what he needs to do, apparently, from when I ever watched like an analysis of him. His
Yeah.
ball striking is usually pretty good. He has to
Yeah.
putt.
He has
I
to
mean,
putt.
Every
Yeah.
player's like that.
Yeah, definitely. The match play was a blast last week.
So
we
good.
talked about saving the match play on the podcast, and when we recorded last week, we were a couple of matches into the tournament, and we now can look back at it and say, what a great tournament that was. We cannot lose that match play event, or a match play event.
Something
Agreed.
needs to
A
happen.
match play event.
We cannot
Of
lose
some
that.
format, if it needs to be less players, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
Something. Because
Bring that
it's just a nice, refreshing thing to have. Especially this time of year, I think it's good. Because the golf season or the PGA Tour season has started. Haven't had a major yet. You get a little, like Rory said, he's like, I liked it. I get a little bit of head-to-head action, more pressure on every shot. I don't know. It seems like, I don't know, everyone likes it, so why not keep it?
It's fun to watch because they go after more opportunities. Like there's more chip-ins. There's guys hitting it closer.
It's different golf. Yeah.
That's what I want to watch.
It's very different. There is a lot of like, oh, whatever, I'm one down. I have to eagle this hole. I'll just go for the crazy shot. They never hit that in stroke play.
No.
No, that was awesome. So by the time we record, we'll be recording next week on the eve of the Masters.
That's right.
But, or actually, no, it'll be Thursday of the Masters. It'll be in and around there. But you guys will not, hear from us until the Masters.
Masters
until Masters will have
tomorrow, if you're listening to this right now.
Tomorrow, that's right.
Tomorrow is the
Tomorrow if you're
Masters.
listening.
Congratulations to you in the future.
I know.
It's tomorrow.
So we're kind of reaffirming our picks. We have to note the side bet that's going on here.
Yeah, please tell people what you two have cooked.
I've wasted $100 in many other ways, but this is not a waste.
Oh,
shocked.
Our bet between Ian and I.
Yeah.
I've got Tiger. He's got Jason Day. And the bet is who's going to finish better.
Who's going to finish better?
Tiger's going to make the cut. Jason Day won't. No offense, Jason Day.
Oh, really?
It'll be
Hot
$100.
take. Hot take. I gave you guys my opinion
I
off
do
camera.
fancy Tiger to
It's going to be nice and warm. It's actually going to be roasting.
True. If it's
He's
warm,
in-
that makes a big difference
He's
for
feeling
Tiger.
great.
I like Tiger to make the cut. I would certainly bet on that.
I would put money on that as
I
well.
would say, he's good for a
Top 5.
2 under, 1 under kind of first 2 rounds.
And a couple of 74s or something.
And then he's I think long range forecast, but the Saturday earlier looks cold and the afternoon looks pretty good. So as of right now, I think it's 11 is what they're talking about.
So that's good
the
for him,
morning,
his afternoon
the low
round on
temperature.
the Saturday.
Yeah,
Last
you think
off.
he's going to get 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
It'll be last off. Oh my.
Listen, it's win-win for me.
60-something,
True.
60-something.
Win-win
If
for
you,
me.
burn $100 and Tiger's in
if
the top
Tiger
3,
makes
you'll be
some
happy.
kind of run, I'll be over the moon.
Yeah.
I've always
If
said,
not, we $100.
if he wins at Augusta one more time, I get the Tiger Woods logo tattooed somewhere on my body.
on your butt.
No,
Right.
sure.
And the podcast listeners get to decide where.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, no problem.
Exactly. That'll be awesome. So that's the bet that's currently going. So yeah, guys, get into Mikey on Instagram and
Bet365.
yeah, bet.
And your local sports book.
It's done.
Yeah, so definitely pay attention for that. Matty boy, who's your one man pick? Who's putting on the green jacket?
I'll go boring. I'll say Scheffler again.
Okay.
I saw something this
Cool,
week.
I see.
I saw something this week that said he's apparently playing better than he was in the lead up to last year's Masters.
I could definitely buy that.
We enjoyed your dark horse picks, boys. So I'll be the boring one and say
Yeah.
if he played better this year than he did last year and he won last year, then that's probably where the smart money is.
Yeah, while my pick certainly to win it, my pick is Rory. I saw some things in his game last week where it's just like if he can find that level of comfort off the tee
And on the green.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's got to be so tough round there.
Agreed.
66, 66, 67 when he visited a couple of weeks ago. It's got to have been a huge confidence booster for him.
Yeah, I mean, the match play to finish his match that day where we were playing on Thursday night, this league that we play, and we all paused. We're like, you're not going to believe what Rory just did.
Right,
I mean, if you drive it like that, I'm not saying he has to hit it 370 all the time, but if you just drive it straight and confident like that at Augusta, I mean, who else can win? The guy's putting well, he's chipping well.
Yeah.
Like,
He's got everything that matters.
but he's not Tiger.
Okay, enough. We'll have to cut you off.
2019 was a good time.
It was a good time.
That's hard to forget.
So I'm saying Rory.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'd love to see Rory do it. Career Grand Slam for golf right now would be cool.
Would that be who you, if your life depended on it right now
put
today,
Rory on
you'd
it.
say?
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But Tiger. Tiger, if you're listening, apparently he's a listener.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
He texted me.
Yeah. Nothing else going on in his life.
No, he's not. But yeah, so true. Yeah,
I'm a fan.
He's got a lot on his plate right now going to the Masters. So hopefully he can focus. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I just hope he manages his week. You know, it's a lot. You know, it's well documented. You know, obviously the challenges he now has. You know, walking. You know, that amount. He knows that course
so well.
Better than anyone by a multiple.
Yep.
You know, at this point. So I just hope he kind of gets there, gets a little feel for around the greens, gets out to, 13 a few times, hits the new tee shot in 13, figures out his kind of some strategies around, if he doesn't quite catch one, what's his not, all that sort of stuff. I hope he gets dialed in with that. And I can certainly see him, putting together a nice week. I just, hope he manages his kind of energy.
We will find out.
We will find out. All right, guys. Really great to have Lou Stagner on the podcast this week. Yeah, absolutely fantastic to have our first guest with us.
That's great. He did
really,
great.
really enjoyed that, and certainly more guests coming on the podcast. Guys, if you don't already subscribe to the podcast, please do. We always ask every week. It makes a big, big difference.
It really does.
To us to share the podcast, review the podcast, and certainly subscribe in whatever platform it is that you enjoy it on.
Yeah, wherever you'd like to see it or watch or listen to it. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.